For that, attached you find our good old starting project. I already started the server with npm start and the TypeScript watch process with tsc-w. And the very first thing we need to configure there is in a tsconfig file, make sure your target is set to ES6. And then, if you scroll down, make sure that you add this experimental decorators line here. And add a comma in front of this, and then you can auto format to format this all correctly. This is important, otherwise you won't be able to use decorators in your project. So make sure you tweak your tsconfig JSON file appropriately. And with that, we can dive right in and write our first decorator here in the app.ts file. And I want to start with a decorator we can add to a class. Now, decorators in general are all about classes, but this is a decorator which we will add to the class as a whole. For that, let's say we have a class, person, a very trivial class, where we have a name, maybe with a value of max pre-initialized here, where we have a constructor function where I just log creating person object so that we see that this is executed. And then, of course, we can create a new person here with the new keyword like this. And if we want to, we can of course log this created person. And this should hold no surprises. If we save all of that, it compiles without errors. And if we visit our page then on localhost 3000, in the JavaScript console, we see creating person object, which is coming from the constructor. And we of course also see the person itself here. Now there, in this example, we got no decorators involved. Let's change this. At the top of the file, let's add a decorator. And a decorator, and that's really important to understand, is in the end just a function. A function you apply to something, for example, to a class, in a certain way. So let's create a function here with the function keyword, and I will name it logger. Now this is a function. The only special thing here is that I start with a capital character. This is not a must do, by the way. You don't have to use a capital starting character. You can use a lowercase one as well. You just see a lot of decorators out there in libraries which you might use that use uppercase starting characters, and therefore I'll do the same here. So the logger function here is a function, and we can apply this as a decorator, as it will turn out. Now let's add a console login here, logging, so that we can see when this function runs, because I will not call it directly. Instead, I want to add it as a decorator to this class. And we do so by adding an @ symbol here in front of the class, and then our function here, just like this. Now a couple of special things here. The @ symbol here is a special identifier TypeScript sees or recognizes. And then the thing directly after the @ symbol should point at a function, not execute it, but point at it, which should be your decorator. Now here you see that logger then accepts too few arguments to be used as a decorator here. So the good thing is TypeScript understands that I want to use it as a decorator here. The bad thing is we don't pass enough arguments. And indeed, decorators receive arguments. How many arguments depends on where you use the decorator. Here, for a decorator we add to a class, we get one argument, and that's the target of this decorator, so to say, which is our constructor function. So we can say we get a function here as an argument in the end. We could also name it constructor, because in the end we will get our constructor function of this class, or whichever class we add this decorator to, as an argument. Now let's also console log that so that we can get some insight into this constructor argument here. And let's save this. And as you see, it compiles without errors. And if we now have a look at our output, we see the old code from before, but we also see the logging output and this constructor function being logged. Well, we actually see the whole class here, but classes in the end are just syntactical sugar over constructor functions. Please also note that our decorator output, logging, and this class or this constructor function log here is printed first before we see creating person object and our person object. Because indeed decorators, and that's really important, decorators execute when your class is defined, not when it is instantiated. You don't need to instantiate your class at all. We could remove that code for instantiating the class, and we would still get that decorator output. So the decorator runs when JavaScript finds your class definition, your constructor function definition, not when you use that constructor function to instantiate an object. That's really important to understand. So this is our first decorator. It's not the only way of how we can create a decorator though.